Suck it up, fanboys. We're building with Intel today. Need a Windows or Office key but don't want to pay retail? MMORC.com has all the best deals and a sweet discount for BPS Customs viewers. Just head over to the site linked below and enter code BAN35 for 35% off your order total, meaning you could snag Windows 10 Home for under $10. Fill out your email and place your order, and then click the extract code button at the top of the page. From there, it's as easy as heading to your Windows activation settings and inputting your shiny new key. For more information, head to MMORC.com or check out the links below. As longtime viewers of this channel likely already know, we do PC builds all the time here. So if you want to make sure that you don't miss out on any upcoming project, hit that subscribe button down below and also consider following me on Twitter at BPS_customs. Now, we haven't actually done a proper build in quite a while here, probably at least a few weeks. And the reason for that is because obviously parts availability is still really, really bad. Everything from AMD CPUs to basically any GPU ever is out of stock right now, and it's almost impossible to build a proper gaming PC from the ground up if you don't already have at least some of those components. However, there are a couple of really cool new items that have come into the office over the past few weeks that I wanted to just check out, do a build with, see how they perform, and then have this content out there for you guys for the future when things hopefully do become available. And the basis for this build is going to be the MESHLICIOUS. Now, overlooking the fact that that is the worst case name that I have ever heard, Sunny Side Up Designs, or SSUPD, is actually the sister company of Lian Li. So when they reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to check out our new case design? I was definitely all about it. And when it arrived, it looks pretty good. It's got 3 full mesh sides and 1 glass pane. Now, I'm not entirely sure if this is going to ship like this or if it's going to ship with the full 4 mesh panels. However, I think this is going to be really good for promoting great cooling for both the CPU and the GPU. This is a really interesting interior layout as well. It allows for 3-slot graphics cards, full-size power supplies, and up to 280mm all-in-one liquid coolers. So despite the fact that this case is pretty small, we're still going to be able to populate it with some really interesting and powerful hardware. Regardless of the fact that it can fit ATX power supplies, it also has a configuration that fits SFX power supplies, and this will afford slightly more interior room, so that's what we're going to do. This is the V850 SFX Gold from Cooler Master, and it is one of the newer generations of SFX power supplies that provides an increased power output. Used to be that you couldn't get SFX power supplies in anything more than 600 watts or so, but now companies like Cooler Master, like EVGA, like Corsair are coming out with more powerful power supplies to enable higher powered small form factor builds. Now, something that you guys might see on this table that is a little questionable for some of you is an Intel CPU. We haven't done an Intel project on this channel in quite a while, and the 10700K is actually a absolutely fabulous gaming chip. It's 8 cores and 16 threads. It has a 5 GHz plus boost clock. You can overclock it like crazy, and it's going to give us some serious gaming chops. For the motherboard for our Z490 platform, we are going with a product from MSI. This is the MEG Z490i Unify, and I have to admit, when I first saw this board, I was pretty impressed with the design. Not only does it look great, but it also has a really cool wraparound I/O cover. Now, it's not groundbreaking, but no other company is really doing that. It does provide a really cool aesthetic inside of the case, in addition to the all matte black finishes on everything and the cool little dragon accent at the bottom. So not only should it provide some good performance for a 10700K, but hopefully it should look really cool inside of our build. Now, for cooling, I wanted to try to take advantage of the space afforded inside of the MESHLICIOUS by populating the entire 280mm space for radiators and fans. So we're going to use the Pure Loop 280. This is from Be Quiet. I used it before in a build on a 5950X, and it did a great job. So I think it should be just fine on our 10700K. But I also think that the build aesthetic will really benefit from a product like this. This is basically all black except for the block top design, which is silver with a white accent ring around it. Now for the touchy subject of a GPU. I know that likely these are still very difficult to find on the market, if at all, But we do need to put something in here for graphics. So we're going to use an RTX 3070. This one is from PNY. It's their Epic X RGB RTX 3070. It looks really cool. It's got a very neat brushed accent over the fan shroud. It's a 2.5 slot design with a pass-through cooler. The only thing that I'm not entirely sure of is the placement of the PCIe power cables. They're kind of in the middle of the card, which I've never really been a fan of. However, in this kind of a case, I don't think that it's going to be a problem. We're not going to have to worry about weird cable routing situations because in a Mini-ITX build, things are already pretty tight anyway. So I am hopeful that the 3070 is going to get adequate cooling and give us really good performance inside of this case, but I guess we'll see. And then rounding out the build, we have a set of memory from Guile, or Jail, or I'm not really sure. I've never knew how to pronounce that word, but they've been around for a long time. They make some really solid memory components, and this is their Orion Ddr4. It's 4,000 speed, a 2x8 gig kit, and you can see that it's branded that it works with Ryzen. So I think they specifically designed it so that you can hit that 4,000 speed on an AM4 platform. That's not going to prevent us from doing anything good with it in this build, even though we're using Intel. I'm still hoping that we can get it up to 4,000 megahertz, but I guess we will see. So those are the components that we are going to be building with here today. Let's cue that build time lapse. This was a really interesting little project with some great conclusions. The MESHLICIOUS case, as terrible as that name is every single time I say it, is a really good enclosure. I really like the things that Lian Li / SSUPD have done with this build here, and the fact that you can use full-size components and really powerful full-size components like a 280 millimeter cooler and a giant graphics card inside of a case that's these proportions is definitely great. And I think the way that they're able to do that is because the case is almost fully meshed out. You don't have to worry about cramming everything into a space if the exterior of that space is just fully open anyway. It doesn't really matter how close the components are together as long as they're still able to pull fresh air from the outside in basically every direction. This was pretty evident when we looked at thermals, because even though the GPU is pressed up against this glass on the side of the case, the rest of the case is so open that we were able to maintain somewhere in the mid to high 60s on the GPU temps while gaming, Longer sessions, like when I got into playing some Call of Duty Cold War, we got up into the lower 70s. But still, anything in that range for a small form factor case and a large graphics card, especially with a little bit of glass here, is pretty impressive. CPU temperatures while gaming were, as expected, extremely low. We were looking at mostly in the mid 40s. Sometimes we got up to 50 degrees Celsius on the CPU while gaming, so no worries there at all. The 280 millimeter cooler combined with the complete mesh enclosure does some really good things. As far as the memory, I was able to dial in a one-click XMP overclock to 4,000 megahertz without any issues at all, and that's the way we ran all of our tests. I do have some comments here on the build process and some problems you might encounter, which is what I actually ran into. So the case is bigger than a lot of tiny Mini-ITX cases, but is still pretty small, and as a result, things get tight. The biggest issue that I ran into was the AIO tube length and the fact that the Pure Loop 280 has a pump that's in line with that tubing, so it makes the end of that tubing a little less flexible than you would normally have on any other AIO. I had a little bit of problem situating this cooler so that the tubes would be able to run without being kinked and also not interfere with any other components. As a result, the rest of the interior of this case is not very neat, and I kind of tried a little bit and then I kind of gave up because these projects don't stay together for very long, and there's really no point in me putting hours into cable management if it's just going to come apart. Regardless, you will have to work some magic if you want the interior of this case to look neat. There's no place to hide. As is with a lot of Mini-ITX cases, there's no tucking wires behind the motherboard tray. There's no neatly routing things along, or behind crevices or shrouds. Anything you plug in is a wire that's going to be dangling out there somewhere, and you got to get creative with where you put it if you want them to be hidden. I'm sure I could have done a better job than I did. However, like I said, I didn't really have the time, and for this build, it was really irrelevant. The performance was great anyway. There is a little bit of a byproduct with the case having this much openness. It is a little bit louder than normal, especially when the GPU ramps up during gaming and you have the AIO fans running as well. It was a little bit louder than your normal gaming PC might be. With that being said, though, it's nothing that can't be overcome or that was overly distracting, especially if you're gaming with headphones on, or if you're really focused into the game anyway, it's not really that big of a deal. But it is something that I did notice when I fired everything up and was running some tests. I did run some benchmarks and or play some games just to test everything out. So as you normally see here, we did do the Shadow of the Tomb Raider can benchmark. That ran smoothly with no issues. This was without any RTX features enabled, so no DLSS or anything like that. Played some Doom Eternal that, of course, ran great, as you would expect. Also ran through a little bit of Cyberpunk to see how the RTX 3070 fares in 1440p, ray tracing on Ultra, and DLSS enabled, and the end result was actually a really strong performance and a very enjoyable gameplay experience. The same can be said for Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. I was playing some team deathmatch against some bots just to see how the performance was in a newer, competitive, fast-paced title. Again, really good experience there. Had a lot of fun playing that game for a bit. And then I wanted to play some DX11 titles that might have been older, so I loaded up Witcher 3. Again, CD Projekt Red title, open world adventures, as I'm sure you guys know, but it is a game that's 6 years old at this point and still looks really good. And again, the performance was on point here. I did also want to give a quick recognition to Sunny Side Up Designs because they include with the build a right angle HDMI cable, which you will need because the graphics card is pointed down and then the exit for the cable pass-through is out the back of the case. So if you put a regular non-45 degree DisplayPort connector on here, you might have trouble with it interfering with the bottom of the case itself. So they give you a 45 degree adapter in the box, which is pretty cool. And you guys may have seen in the time lapse, but I removed these. These are mounting rails that are at the front of the case. They come pre-installed for 240 millimeter all-in-one liquid coolers or 120 millimeter fans. If you wanted to go with 140 millimeter fans and or a 280 cooler, you have to remove these, and it's really easy. It's just a couple of screws, and it allows them to be interchangeable with each other really easily. So Mini-ITX builds are always really interesting. I do have a fondness for them, although I don't use one on the daily. I always like building them because they present some interesting challenges, and when they're done right and the cases are laid out in such a way that your hardware is not only presented well visually, but also performs well, that is definitely a feat. And I think the MESHLICIOUS accomplishes this, as much as it pains me to say it, because I absolutely can't stand the name. So I don't think the name is going anywhere. This is going to be released pretty soon. There's a link down below along with a link to all the other parts I used here. But for the future, please, no more meme names. None of that. I hate it. I think it's terrible. I think you could do better. But in any event, the product is good. The build is good. What did you guys think? Let me know down below in the comments. Also, get subscribed if you're not already. Thank you so much for watching this video as always, guys, and I will see you next time. This case is like if a meme came to life. Like, how much mesh do you want? Yes. I can't buy that GPU. You shouldn't be using it ever.